Welcome
Are
to
you
Public
ready to
Speaking
work
with
directly
Peter
with Peter and develop
Do
your
you want
public
to be
speaking
calm,
skills?
confident,
Then
and
schedule your
credible
free
every
call
time you
with
speak
Peter
in public?
at Peter George
Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests
call.
discuss public
Again,
speaking
that's
tips,
Peter George
techniques, and tactics that help
call
you increase
for your personal
impact,
coaching and
influence,
support.
and income.
Now back to
Here's
Peter
your
and
host,
his guest,
Peter George.
The mission of basic training is to motivate, train, and inspire the next generation of servicemen and women. And in that spirit, who better to discuss the basics of public speaking than a veteran of both the service and the White House Communications Agency? In this episode, Darrell Williams, a man who served his country and now anyone looking to be a more effective leader, covers a few fundamentals that'll help you serve your audiences. Darrell is a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator who provides clients with expertise in leadership, relationships, and purpose. His leadership background includes 30 years of federal service, highlighted by his selection as a White House Communications Agency All-Star and Senior Manager of the Year. Darrell's leadership coaching is based on a stellar 20-year military career where he traveled as an operations and vice presidential communications officer, leading over 500 White House missions. Following the tragedies of September 11, 2001, he was selected as one of 5 key leaders to direct emergency action communications for the Vice President of the United States. Here's my chat with Darrell Williams. Darrell, it's great to have you with us today.
Peter, thank you so much for having me.
To one degree or another, we all get nervous before speaking. As an experienced speaker, what do you do to calm your nerves?
Well, one thing I learned to do, Peter, is I just had to accept it. So many times people try to do things to get rid of it. And I always tell people, if you're nervous, to me, that means you care. So that's how I look at it. So for me, especially my military background, I just have a conversation with the butterflies and say, hey, I know we're all in this together. All the thing I asked is that we just fly in formation. If we do that, we're going to be okay.
There's a quote I put on LinkedIn every so often by a gentleman named Rod Gilbert that says, it's all okay to have butterflies as long as they fly in formation.
That's where somebody told me about it, and I love that.
Hey, you're going to have the butterflies anyway, right?
They are. So just let them work for you.
I like what you said. As long as you have the butterflies, it shows that you still care.
I agree.
So what's that one must-do thing that you have when you're preparing for your speeches?
For me, Peter, one of the things I do is I always want to make sure when I reach out to the person that invited me, I always ask them, what do you want the audience to get out of this? Right? You tell me, because I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. I'm going to hit whatever mark you want me to hit, because to me, it's never about me, Peter. It's, I've been blessed and gifted to be able to do this. So I might as well do it where I can help somebody, make their day, whatever the case is. So I always ask that point of contact, what do you want the audience to get out of this? And I don't care if I'm speaking to adults, children, I want to make sure I hit that mark.
Makes a huge difference, doesn't it? As opposed to, I'll just get up and speak what I speak about.
I think so, because being in the military, heard a lot of speeches and a lot of great speakers, but the ones that you remember, it's like the ones that you were thinking like, man, he must have been in our staff meeting last week because he's really hitting those marks, that things that we talked about that we wanted to do or get better at. And you just remember those.
Have you ever seen just the opposite, where someone was an excellent speaker, but they didn't touch on anything that was relevant to you as an audience?
Unfortunately, I have. And it was very painful because, again, they were great, but it's kind of one of those like, wait a minute, this is just for example, this is a Father's Day event and you're talking about mothers. What are you doing here? It's just really just definitely sends a different type of message.
When you're creating a speech for your audiences and you know what they need to get out of it, do you write your entire speech out, or how do you prepare?
For me, I actually do an outline. I do not write out my whole speech. When I first started speaking, I always tell people this. They're like, oh my gosh, you're really good. I'm like, trust me, it wasn't like that in the beginning. And I always remember my very first speech, I tried to write out everything. And oh my gosh, it was a catastrophe. I lost my spot, couldn't find different words. It was just ridiculous. And I was like, man, before I get back up there, I have to do better. So I did a lot of travel in my military days. And if we were on a trip over a weekend, I would go to a local church. And I never forget, Peter, I went to a church in Chicago. They had an early service. And somehow I was close enough where I saw the pastor come up with his sermon. And I saw his paper, and I kid you not, it was just an outline. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if the rest of his speech is inside of his docket or something. And he did that speech, and I was like, wow, that was impactful, and found out that was his speech. So after the service, I introduced myself to him. I was out of town and just told him I was just really impressed. Up and coming speaker myself, just wanted to get some notes from you. I noticed you had one piece of paper. Where was the rest of your speech? And then he told me, he said, hey, I just do an outline. I just find that whenever I put down to paper, that's kind of what I mean to say. And I just go with it. And after that, my next time, I'm just going to try the outline and see what happens. And it just worked for me. And to this day, I just do the outlines.
I like that. Because I think a lot of us try to write it out and then memorize it.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem to flow as freely. Yet we can all say, hey, tell me about this one point. You go, sure, I can tell you about that.
Beautiful.
And off you go.
So true. So true. And one thing I found too that allows me to do is I can ad lib. Because sometimes when I'm doing something, I can kind of feel a certain like, man, this would be a great time to mention X. I can do that and still know where I am and not have to worry about, okay, where was I?
I always think of blues players. We were talking about guitars offline here.
Yes.
And I think about blues players who can go off on their own riffs for a while. And you're actually thinking, where are they going?
Right.
And they make sense of it. And then they come right back.
Oh, man.
And the band just keeps going with them.
Yeah, that's talent.
Yep. That's a talent. That's experience. I don't think that starts on day one.
Not for me.
Me neither. What was your most difficult speech? And why was it so difficult for you?
So this one's a little personal. I know we were talking before we came online, and I would definitely share this with anybody. My most difficult speech was speaking at my father's eulogy. That, Peter, was, I'm the oldest of four. It's one of those things you kind of know. My dad got sick kind of early as well and passed away kind of young. And, I reached out to my brothers and sisters like, hey, what do you guys want to do? And they were like, hey, whatever you say, we're okay with. So I remember reaching out, 'cause I live in Maryland, called the church in Arkansas where he was close to and asked the pastor if the place was available. And he said, absolutely. And I was just going to leave it at that, start working on everything else. But then he came back to me, and Peter, he said, and oh, by the way, if you want to do your father's eulogy, I totally understand. And at that time, I was like, what are you talking about? Pastors always do the eulogy. At least that's what I was used to. And my wife was like, you really need to think about that, right? And I just thought about it, Peter, and like we talked about before, you start thinking about those messages that your father gave you when you were growing up and those special moments. And I just got to the point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I looked at my family dynamics and the people that were coming, because my father, a lot of people knew him. And again, I wanted the message to be not just, wow, he said a lot of great things about his father, but I want them to walk away with, wow, what he said in there was interesting. The questions, right? Where are you at in your life right now? What are some things that you want to accomplish, right, that you haven't accomplished yet? What are those relationships that need to be mended? Kind of threw a lot of those in there, and I was able to let them know, yeah, we loved our dad. Yeah, he took some paths that was a little bit different, but overall meant well, loved everybody. And I was good, Peter, until the very last word. And like we were talking about before, that adrenaline, everything is going. When I said that last word, I just broke down. I was like, I think that's when all the emotion kind of kicked in, because, it's your father kind of right in front of you. And, you're trying to look straight ahead. You're looking at the family and adding a couple of jokes in there about some of the funny moments. But after that last word, I think all the emotion just came over me, and definitely just realized like, wow, this is my last time I'm going to see him.
Isn't that amazing how we can hold back that emotion? We know it's building up behind us, and we can hold it off and we can hold it off. And as soon as we're done, I think our mind just says, okay, here it is.
Yes.
You got through what you had to get through, and it's not going to hold back any longer.
Couldn't hold it back, Peter. Could not.
Eulogies and the like, they're not easy, but they're special. Once you give them, you'll remember them for the rest of your life.
That's true. That is true. And I was very fortunate. The funeral home and the church, they both, kind of videoed the whole service. So I actually have it downstairs. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think with this upcoming Father's Day, I think it's definitely one of those times to pull it out.
Great time to break it out and look at it.
Yeah.
What was one time that you really knew you nailed it? You really nailed that speech.
That one was actually a little bit more fun. That one was, I did a commencement for Strayer University. And the way they do it here in the DC area, they have a lot of different campuses. So even if you went to like their North Carolina one or, those places, if you weren't going to be available for that date, you can all come to this one arena and they would just celebrate everybody. So it was a commencement for Strayer and I'm giving the speech. And next thing you know, it's like you could hear a pin drop. And Peter, I know they had kids there, but it just seemed like for some reason the babies weren't crying, the kids weren't, how long is this going to be? It's just the whole arena was just quiet. And then I got to the last word, and I think I'm positive I used the college's motto, whatever it was, and ended it. And then the place erupted. So I'm getting ready to go back to the chancellor, and they were like, "Thank you so much." And I'm like, man, I hope it was okay, right? I don't know if they're clapping because I finished or because they're about to get their diplomas. And the chancellor was like, "Are you kidding me? They were on pins and needles. Did you hear how quiet it was? They were hanging on your every word, on your every story. It was amazing." Luckily, he told me that because I probably would have left that night like, man, how did I do? Just couldn't tell at that time.
Now, have you ever had ones that didn't go quite so well?
I think the first one that didn't go well was always that first one. And people are so kind, Peter. Like, "Oh, you were great. Good effort." You're like, it's like, it's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm a big boy.
Not bad for your first try.
Exactly.
The words I never want to hear, good job.
Oh,
Because if that's all they have to say at the end of it, and they can't say, "I took this away," or "I learned this, I'm going to implement that."
yes.
If all they've got to say is "good job," I didn't do a good job.
Definitely, you would hear that in some of the military speeches I was telling you about earlier where the people weren't on point. There were definitely a lot of good jobs. I do remember that.
Are you ready to work directly with Peter and develop your public speaking skills? Then schedule your free call with Peter at petergeorgepublicspeaking.com/call. Again, that's petergeorgepublicspeaking.com/call for your personal coaching and support. Now back to Peter and his guest.
Darrell, share with us one helpful item that you implement in each and every speech.
So for me, one of the things I do is I always love to end my speech with a story. All the great speakers that I looked up to, especially in the military, like the ones I remember the most, they always gave you this story that just kind of just put everything into place. You're like, wow, the speech was already great, but now with the story, it just really took it to the next level. So that was one thing I really tried my best to become a storyteller. And I would talk to some of my mentors and different places I would go to and hear somebody, at a change command ceremony or promotion ceremony. And I would go to that speaker and like, "Hey, what did you do to really get to that point of the storytelling?" And they said, "You just practice, you keep your ears open, you listen to the news, right? What's going on around you." And one thing I do, I'm a movie buff, right? So my wife kind of hates and loves it because when we're watching a movie, she's looking at it from just the enjoyment and, we're watching it together. You know me, Peter, I'm looking for content. I'm looking for like, man, I like how they did that. And wow, that resonated with me. So for me, I always try to add a story definitely toward the end of my speeches.
They resonate with people.
They do.
We love stories.
I remember I was doing a speech at National Louis University in Chicago, and I was getting an award, and I was talking to the gentleman that was sponsoring me, former colonel, and he's like, "So what are you going to say at your speech?" And I was like, I kind of got this idea. And he wasn't hearing what he really wanted to hear, right? And I was like, "But what do you think, Steve?" And he said, "What I noticed, the people that received this award in the past, when they just tell their story, He said, that just seemed to resonate with everybody. And I just went back to the hotel, changed my whole speech, and put more of, my upbringing and things that I learned and how it helped me throughout life and gave me those values. And after the speech, I told him, I said, Steve, thank you so much for sharing that yesterday when we went to lunch, because I think I would have missed a great opportunity had I not listened to you.
Speeches with stories work.
Yes.
And I think too many of us get up and it's all the nuts and bolts.
Right. That is so true.
And your audience can't digest nuts and bolts. They can digest thoughts and emotion.
Yes, exactly. And the good thing about that, like you said, Peter, is I don't care what audience you're speaking to. Like you said, everybody remembers a good story.
Think of it. We see a good movie. We tell others about it.
All the time.
You got to go see this. This is what happens. You're not going to see it. Oh, let me tell you about it then.
Yes.
So we want to share stories.
That is so true.
It's excellent advice for speakers. Darrell, you've seen a lot. You've been in the military. You've worked in Washington for years. You've seen and heard a lot over the years. What was the best advice that you ever received about giving a speech?
So, it's so funny. One of my favorite mentors, because once I retired from the military, I told him I want to start my speaking business. And I told him, not full time, just want to do it occasionally, go to a lot of, high schools and faith-based organizations and whoever would have me where I can, bring some value. And he always said these three things. And first it was like, it's got to be more than that. And he's like, even to this day, if I ask him, hey, sir, what's some good advice on the speech I'm going to be speaking at XYZ place? And he would always say the same thing, Peter. Be brief, be good, be gone. He would always say the best speeches aren't the longest.
No, you can go back to the example of Gettysburg Address. What's that, 272 words? I can't think of the gentleman's name from Boston who spoke before Lincoln, but he spoke for 2 hours. No one ever mentions a word about what he said that day.
That is a great point.
But the Gettysburg Address is going down as one of the key addresses in our history.
That is true. Very, very true.
So no, it doesn't have to be lengthy. It just has to get the job done.
Yes.
The gentleman who said that to you, awesome. Awesome. I hope everybody keeps that in mind now that you've shared that. Can you say that again?
Absolutely. He said, be brief, be good, and be gone.
Beautiful. I love that. Darrell, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate that you've been here. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
So, Peter, they can definitely go to our website, www.allianceseminars.org, all one word. Definitely on Facebook, same title as well. And I tell you, when I first got your invite, I was so excited because even in the military, everybody thinks that everybody can speak in the military, but it's not true. There's a lot of people that run away from speaking. It is truly one of those things that a lot of people are afraid to do. And I was reading your website. I'm like, man, thank goodness for somebody like Peter that can help those people that because of their position, because of their role, they need that additional assistance. And to have people like yourself doing this, it's definitely value added.
Thank you for the kind words, Darrell. I really appreciate that.
That's very true.
Well, it has been a pleasure to have you here, and I want to thank you for your time and also for serving in the military and then your work in Washington afterwards. You've served this country well.
Thank you so much. And again, it's just an honor just to be able to give back.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.